My mom kicked me out to make room for her new family, and years later, she came knocking, asking me to pay for my siblings' college after hearing I'd made something of myself. To give you a little background, she had me when she was just 20, and my biological dad? He was never really in the picture. She told me he didn't want kids, and since they'd only been dating a few months when she found out she was pregnant, she gave him the choice to walk away, and that's exactly what he did. She said their split had been messy, and because of that, she didn't bother pursuing child support. He wasn't interested in paying, and honestly, cutting contact worked out just fine for both of them. Luckily, my grandparents stepped in. They were always in her corner. Thanks to their constant support, she was able to finish school and land a job. Growing up, she dated here and there, and when I was around 8, she started seeing this guy named Harry. He was a coworker of hers, and they stayed together for over 3 years before getting married. Harry and I were never exactly close, but we were civil. We managed to coexist without too much friction. Then, about 4 years into their marriage, she got pregnant again, this time with twins, and the whole house lit up with excitement. I was genuinely happy for her. Looking back, maybe I should have seen the writing on the wall. But back then, I still believed my mom would always have my back. After everything we'd been through together, I thought I was safe from being pushed aside. But the truth is, things started shifting after she married Harry. It was subtle at first, like we were just drifting, and I figured it was temporary. While she was pregnant, I tried to be supportive. Really, I did. But it felt like the more I tried, the more irritated she became. Eventually, I started keeping my distance so I wouldn't set her off. I figured if I gave her space, things would calm down. Turns out, I wasn't invisible enough. 6 months after the twins were born, she and Harry sat me down for a talk. That's when they told me I couldn't stay in the house anymore. They said they had 2 infants now, and not enough room or money for me. Thing is, I just turned 16, so they couldn't legally kick me out without consequences. They made it sound like it was all about money, like having a big family was just too much on their income. But both of them were web engineers, and we'd been living pretty comfortably. Supporting 2 adults, a teen, and 2 babies didn't seem impossible to me. Deep down, I knew they just wanted me out. I wasn't ready to go. Even after that talk, I tried to find ways to make it work, to keep my place in that house. When I told them I could get a job to help out with money, my mom shut that down fast. She said the family's limited resources needed to go toward the kids who deserved it more. Not that they needed it more or deserved. That word stuck with me. That one comment was enough to make it clear I had to go. It hit me hard, but I got the message loud and clear. I wasn't wanted there. They didn't even bother to tell me where I should go. They just assumed I'd figure it out. And I did. Their little push worked like a charm. Technically, it wasn't an official eviction since I left on my own. But let's be real, it felt exactly like being kicked out. I'd been cornered into leaving, and it didn't feel like I had any real say in it. So, I packed up and went straight to my grandparents' house that same day. Now, my grandparents weren't thrilled with what my mom had done, but they still wanted to be part of the twins' lives, so they didn't cut her off. At 16, I picked up a part-time job because I couldn't keep relying on my grandparents financially. They were getting older and had their own health issues to deal with. Every now and then, I'd see Mom and Harry when they stopped by to visit my grandparents with the twins. But even when we were in the same room, it was like I didn't exist. They never really asked how I was doing. Every interaction felt stiff and distant, like they were just being polite out of obligation. Honestly, they looked happier without me around. It stung to see how much calmer my mom seemed without me in the picture. Still, I knew there was nothing I could do about it. I stayed with my grandparents until it was time for college. Mom wasn't involved at all, not even to help me move in. My friends had to step up and help me get settled in my dorm because my grandparents weren't in any shape to handle that kind of move. I asked Mom and Harry for help, but they turned me down flat, saying they needed to save for the twins' future. That meant I had no choice but to take out student loans. Luckily, one of my uncles agreed to co-sign, as long as I promised he'd never be on the hook for repayment. I gave him my word. All through college, I held down jobs, anything I could do to stay ahead on my payments and not fall into debt. I wanted to graduate without feeling like I owed anyone anything. By the time I finished, I'd kept that promise. Mom and I barely talked while I was in school. When I graduated, the only ones who showed up were my grandparents. My mom didn't even send a text to say congrats. After college, I went straight into working full-time and moved into my own place. I didn't want to be a burden on my grandparents, especially with their age and health concerns. Those first few years were rough. I didn't earn much, but I made it work. I budgeted hard, paid my rent and utilities, bought groceries, chipped away at my student loans, and even started putting a little aside for the future. That was life on a tight budget, plain and simple. But slowly, things began to change. I started climbing the ladder at work. It wasn't overnight, but I pushed through, and eventually, I worked my way up. Now, looking back, I'm proud of what I've built. I didn't have much help along the way, but I got here on my own. These days, I'm in a pretty solid spot. I'm 33 now and hold a senior management position at the same company where I started right out of school. A few months back, I landed a major promotion. I kept it quiet though, didn't want it becoming a whole thing, so only a few people even knew about it. One of them was my uncle, the one who co-signed that student loan. I told him because I wanted to thank him properly for backing me back when it counted. Apparently, not long after, he ran into my mom and Harry at some family gathering. He mentioned the promotion and suggested she reach out. Maybe say congratulations or something. I know he meant well, but she never did. Not a word. Instead, she showed up at my house out of nowhere with Harry in tow, saying she needed to talk. For the record, I hadn't heard a single word from her since I left for college. After graduation, I cut my mom out of my life completely. Blocked her on everything. I'd held on to the idea that maybe, just maybe, she'd come around. But eventually I realized that was a waste of energy. Truthfully, I don't think she even noticed I was gone. The only ones I stayed in contact with were my grandparents, and even they avoided bringing her up because they knew I couldn't stand talking about her. I didn't really keep up with my uncle either, so I had no idea that my mom and Harry had been struggling financially for a while. I only found out the day they showed up unannounced at my doorstep. Foolishly, I let them in. Some small part of me hoped they were there to finally say they were sorry. But instead of leading with an apology or even a simple congratulations, they opened by mentioning how my uncle told them about my promotion. They brought up how impressive it was that I was one of the youngest people to ever reach that level at my company. What got me was that they were actually surprised I hadn't shared the news with them. The irony? I was shocked they thought I owed them any updates at all, let alone the good kind. Then came the guilt trip. They said they were disappointed I'd cut them off. That it was unfair of me to hold a grudge just because they prioritized their young kids over me back then. They insisted I should have been mature enough to understand their shift in priorities and support their decisions instead of moving in with my grandparents. Honestly, I don't know what fantasy world they live in where I was supposed to be okay with being pushed out of my own home. Somehow, they thought I'd be on board with that choice. They tried to twist it all around, like I was the one in the wrong, for being hurt, for being angry that they kicked me out so they could enjoy their real family in peace. That's how they decided to reconnect with me after all these years, with blame and manipulation. They didn't want to hear anything I had to say. Instead, they launched into this long story about how they had started their own business, which unfortunately didn't make it. They lost a lot of money, and now that the twins were approaching college age, they were scrambling to make ends meet. And just like that, it clicked. That's why they were there. They weren't interested in making things right. They were after money. They didn't even bother to dance around it for long. Pretty quickly, they came out and asked me to help pay for the twins' college. Tried to frame it like I'd be making things right by pitching in, almost as if they were doing me some kind of favor by letting me contribute. That part nearly made me laugh. I told them flat out, no way. Not happening. I said it was incredibly disrespectful to show up out of nowhere and act like they were entitled to my help. I reminded them that I had to bust my ass all through college to cover my own expenses because they chose not to help. They told me back then they needed to save their money for their real kids, the ones who deserved it more. So no, they don't get to show up now and ask for a handout. I told them they had no right to expect a single thing from me, especially not money. I never fought them on their decision to put the twins first. I simply removed myself from the equation. They made their bed. And if they were so focused on saving resources for the twins, well, now's the time to put that plan into action. They can use all that money they save by pushing me aside to cover the college costs they care so much about. At that point, I was done talking. I told them it was time to go. I felt stupid for even letting them into my house, thinking they might have been there to make peace. When I insisted they leave, they got defensive, started getting angry, and pointing fingers to shift the blame. That's when they told me I wasn't completely innocent in all this, that I had overreacted, that I was too eager to cut them out, that they were only trying to protect their family. They accused me of being overly involved and constantly moody when we all lived under the same roof. I was just a kid back then, a teenager, trying to hold on to a connection with a family that was slipping away from me. I couldn't believe that was their complaint, like I'd somehow done something wrong just by wanting to stay close. Then they had the nerve to say I was no better than them because I'd turned down their request for help. They brought up all the years my mom raised me on her own, claiming I was being cold and ungrateful. According to them, this was my chance to pay her back for everything she did and to help out my sister. But the idea that I owed her for being a parent when I was too young to even understand what was happening, that didn't sit right with me. I didn't ask to be dependent on them as a child. It's not like I had a choice. And truthfully, it's not like they were doing me any favors. They kicked me out the moment they figured I was old enough to survive on my own. That was their call. And after that, they went nearly 2 decades without so much as acknowledging my existence. So, yeah, it blew my mind that they could show up now, act like nothing happened, and expect me to open my wallet like I owed them something. The conversation got heated. Things turned personal and ugly. Eventually, I had to lay down a hard line. I told them if they didn't leave my property, I'd call the cops. That's when my mom started going on about the sacrifices she made while raising me. Said she just wanted to be a good mom back then. Before she walked out, she threw one last accusation at me, that I was selfish for not understanding her struggles, that I was flipping the narrative and painting her as the villain when all she ever wanted was to prioritize her family. And honestly, since that day, her words have stuck with me. They've been gnawing at the back of my mind. I keep asking myself, am I being unreasonable? Am I expecting too much from her? Or is she just trying to manipulate me again? That's why I turned to Reddit. I wanted some outside perspective. AITA for refusing to pay for my half-sibling's college when my estranged mom and stepdad are broke. Edit. Even though my uncle meant well, I did have to let him know that what he did wasn't okay. He may have had good intentions, but sharing my private information with my mom without asking? That crossed a line. He apologized again and again. Said he had no idea they were having money problems. He truly didn't expect my mom to react the way she did. He admitted it wasn't his place to tell her about my life, and if reconciliation were ever going to happen, it should have happened on my terms, not because he opened the door. Still, I'm not planning to cut him out. His heart was in the right place, and if I'm being honest, I wouldn't have even gotten into college without him. He was the only one willing to step up and co-sign my loan when nobody else would. So yeah, I made sure he knew he messed up, but I also didn't want him thinking I was ungrateful. I tried to strike a fair balance. I needed to get this out in the open, and I think we handled it well. We're good now. I also talked to my grandparents about everything that happened. They agree, I'm not in the wrong here. They said they'd try to talk some sense into my mom, get her to back off. I know they're still in contact with her because they don't want to lose touch with the twins. I get that. They love all their grandkids. But even they think what she's doing to me isn't right. They said I've already gone through enough, and this added pressure isn't fair. That's where they stand, and honestly, I think that's a pretty reasonable take. First update to follow. Ever since our last conversation, about 9 days ago, my mom's been on a mission to remind me of everything she supposedly did for me while I was growing up. Just about every other day, she shoots over an email trying to guilt me, like I somehow owe her a debt. But truthfully, raising me wasn't some grand favor, it was her legal responsibility as a parent, so I don't really get what she's trying to prove. She only really played the role of mom when it fit into her schedule. As soon as I started pushing back or causing any sort of friction, she and her partner kicked me out, claiming they needed to save money for the twins' future. Well, that future is now, and the twins are grown, so I figure it's time they stand on their own feet instead of dragging me into some twisted guilt game. Even though I'd been ignoring her messages, I finally decided to respond a few days ago. I laid it all out for her, just like I did in my essay, every bit of it. She didn't take kindly to it, which didn't surprise me one bit, and right on cue, she called me ungrateful again. I told her straight up that calling me names wasn't going to change a single thing, and that I was done trying, done hoping, done pretending. I said I didn't want to keep any kind of relationship going with someone who had failed me as a mother. After that, I blocked her email. But instead of backing off, she went ahead and made a new account just so she could keep bugging me. Since she never once gave me that kind of effort when I needed it, I blocked that address too, and I'll keep blocking every new one she sends until she finally gets the message. I'm not here to pine over her. Honestly, I'm relieved this is all finally coming to a head. I think this mess will blow over soon enough, and I'll have the closure I've needed for years. The only reason I even let them in the house that day, why I bothered talking to them, was because some tiny part of me still hoped they had changed. Maybe I thought they'd show up to offer a real apology or tell me they were proud. But after that conversation, it became painfully clear they're just not the kind of people who feel things like guilt, remorse, or accountability. That talk reminded me, again, that trying to reconnect with them is pointless. They're too wrapped up in themselves, too manipulative to ever be honest. And with that, I've completely let go of the idea of making peace. Here's the second update. Today, my mom did something so bizarre, it actually caught me off guard. She showed up at my job. Luckily, I wasn't scheduled to work, so she didn't get far and left pretty quickly. I'd been feeling a bit off, so I took the day to rest, and thank God I did. If I'd been there in person, no doubt she would have caused a scene or tried something to embarrass me. I found out about it when the receptionist called to say my mother had shown up, insisting on seeing me, even after being told I wasn't in. They put her on the line with me, and I told her flat out that I was home, though I was already nervous about whatever she might try next. I warned her plain and direct that if she ever pulled another stunt like that at my workplace, I'd take legal action so intense she wouldn't even want to show her face at her kids' school functions. I really tried to sound serious, and honestly, I think I managed to rattle her a bit. She said she'd leave, but only if I agreed to meet with her face-to-face, so I guess my warning hit home. I reminded her, bluntly, that she couldn't afford a legal battle right now, and she sure as hell wasn't in any position to be making ultimatums. I also pointed out that if my company decided to get involved, things would get a lot uglier fast. Unlike me, they wouldn't be offering any patience or second chances. If she was smart, she'd disappear quietly. Since I didn't hear anything else after that, no calls, no emails, I'm assuming she handed the phone back to the front desk and left. Still, that was way too close for comfort. I can't afford a repeat of that nonsense. So I've decided it's time to speak to a lawyer, just to get clarity on what protections I might have. She hasn't directly threatened me, which makes things tricky, but I still want to know what my options are. I'm hoping this last stunt was uncomfortable enough to make her back off for good. Update 3. At this point, I'm pretty sure we've got solid grounds to file for a restraining order, so I won't waste time debating it anymore. I managed to get her to leave when she turned up at my job last week. But after what happened this week, enough is enough. She crossed a line. A few days ago, I pulled into my driveway after work and found her waiting outside my house. Right away, I told her I didn't want to argue and that if she didn't leave, I was calling the police. As I reached for my phone to dial, she lunged at me, knocked me to the ground, and my phone went flying. She was screaming at me, calling me every name in the book, blaming me for all the problems in her life. She even tried to hit me. It took me a second to process what was happening. I was genuinely stunned by how unhinged she'd become. Luckily, I work out regularly and I'm much younger than she is, so once I snapped out of it, it wasn't hard to get the upper hand. The noise from the struggle must have tipped off my neighbors, because they came running and called the cops. A couple of them even helped hold her down while we waited for the officers to show up. When the police arrived, I didn't hesitate. I pressed charges right then and there. She's in serious trouble now. I've already talked to my attorney and put in a formal request for a restraining order. Word is, Harry took the kids and moved back in with his parents. Not sure if he plans on returning, but apparently after he helped her that night, he confronted her about her behavior. Told her straight up she couldn't keep spiraling like this. She ended up getting into a fight with him, too, so yeah, it looks like she's completely lost control. I honestly think she can't stand the fact that I'm doing well, that I'm stable and successful without her. But whatever's going wrong in her life, that's on her. I won't feel bad. I won't apologize. The restraining order should be finalized soon, and now that my income's gone up, I've started looking into buying a bigger place. Feels like the right time to move forward. Being tied to someone like her is beyond humiliating, and I truly hope, for everyone's sake, that she finds the help she desperately needs. She's burned so many bridges, even with my grandparents. They've told me they want nothing to do with her anymore. And honestly, that's on her, too. She pushed everyone away, and now she's stuck dealing with the fallout. As for me, I'm at peace with it. I've let it go.